We're back answering iRacing's most burning questions using as much math and science as my lazy ass can handle. Today we're going to be answering two questions. The first, does stopping anywhere in particular in the pit box make your pit stop actually faster? And the second, is there still tire warming on the pace lap and out lap of iRacing? So let's load up a test session and a Google Sheets document and let's jump right in. So the first myth that we're going to test is, does stopping in the middle of your pit box actually make your pit stop faster? This is kind of how it works in real life, and I was inspired to do this by watching Ross Chastain kind of overshoot his pit stall, not where he was out of the box, but where he kind of was at the very end of it, and it made his pit crew have to run longer, and it took them longer to do the pit stop, about a second or so. And so going on iRacing, I'm like, well, there's a little animation of the guys doing a pit stop, and so I was curious. Is the pit stop time dependent on that animation, or is the animation just fit in with the predetermined random time? So I did 15 pit stops for each method right here, where the first method I pit in the very, very back of the box. The second I pit in the very, very front of the box. And the third one I pit smack dab in the middle as much as I could. And I did 15 trials of this. And you could say, man, doing 45 pit stops in one session, that sounds grueling. And yeah, it was pretty grueling, but not quite as grueling as 10.5 hours of reading the sporting code. So the average is actually less in the middle, but that's not quite enough just to say, okay, we did 15 trials. Is the middle actually better because it averaged a 13.92 second instead of back, which was 14.1, or the forward, which is 14.28. And the reason that we can't say this yet is because it could be random and there's going to be variance involved. So we're going to look at some more features and statistics of this as well. The maximum pit time for the middle was 14.9 seconds, while the forward and the back each had pit stops over 15 seconds. And if you scroll through the data, the forward and the middle actually had multiple 15-second stops each. And because of this led to their higher standard deviation, which if you're taking a statistics class, that's pretty much just saying that the numbers were farther apart from each other on average. So the lowest standard deviation was at the middle, and it's really pretty significantly different between the middle and pitting in the front of the box. The front of the box had a standard deviation of 0.67, which means that in general, most of the times are within 0.67 seconds to the right or the left of the average, more or less. And so I was like, okay, well, how do I get to figure out if this data is significant or not? And I was thinking back to literally 7 years ago, the last time I took my statistics classes. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I can use this thing called the p-value. And I'm not sure if I can actually use this to determine if the data is significant. So if the pinned comment is a nerd yelling at me for using this wrong, disregard this section. But I used this calculation to find out that the correlation between the back and the forward is not significant, and the correlation between the back and the middle is not significant. The rule of thumb in statistics is that you have to have a 5% or 0.05 p-value. And that would mean pretty much that this number right here would be the percentage of the chances that the data is correlated. And again, I'm not really even sure I can use it in this manner, but we'll figure out after the nerds come in. So what I found out, what this at least says is there's a trend that the back and the front don't really have that much of a significant difference between each other. This could just be caused by random variance. And the back and the middle don't seem to have quite as much of a significance as well. But what we did see was that the forward data was actually pretty significantly different. And that would just mean that 3.9% of the time this data would be on the same plane of existence as the middle. And that would just be by random variance. But 3.9% isn't that often, but it's still, I know it's the 5% is significant according to math, but in this case, I definitely would want to test out some more, but I definitely was getting kind of tired of this at 15 in. So for now, I'm going to come up with the conclusion that pitting at the front of the box might be worse than pitting in the middle of the box, but there is no other conclusions that I can draw from it. The average being a whole almost 0.3 different between 0.3 seconds different between the middle and the forward, and then also seeing this level of variance that was just far less than what we saw in the forward. I would say that at least aim to go in the middle of your pit box when you're pitting. And hey, if there's actually a slight advantage there because of the animation, that's great. And if not, at least you're still aiming for the middle of your pit box. You can't go wrong there. Alright, a new myth, we got a new spreadsheet. So this one is going to be on tire heating methods on the outlap of qualifying and pace laps during a race. I got a lot of questions about this in the previous comment section of the last video, so thank you for recommending, and I'm going to go try to jump in and figure this out. So what I did to figure this out was the VRS tool. Again, it has some different data that you can use for this. So it has tire temperature at the end of a stint, tire wear at the end of a stint, and cold tire pressure, which we don't care about because it's always the same, and then tire pressure at the end of a stint. So what we did to control this was I did an 80-mile-an-hour outlap at Kansas in the C-Fix truck at the same speed for all these methods, and then braking right at the start-finish line and bringing it to a stop in the same method for each of these tire heating methods. So first off, we had the control where I didn't do any tire heating. I just drove around the track to the start finish line, and the final temperatures were unsurprisingly the coldest, and the final tire pressure was also the lowest. But the tire wear, unsurprisingly, is the best. And so we can see the rest of these right here, and I color coded to help you visualize it. But there are 4 methods that I chose: the swerving method, the dragging your brake method, the stabbing your brake method, so speeding up and then stabbing your brake and then speeding up and stabbing your brake, and then swerve and braking. So all in relative to the control, the one that shined the most in raising the tire temperatures and tire pressures was just pure swerving. So when you see those guys just swerving in the middle of the track on a yellow coming to the green, I guess they're onto something, because their tire temperatures were crazy, especially in the rears. The rears were over 20 degrees Fahrenheit better than the competition, and especially the control. So what the swerving method did was I was really sawing the wheel back and forth. It has to be a very exaggerated motion. You got to commit to it or else it's not going to do a heck of a lot. Now, what's the downside of this? It can't all be good, right? Well, look at the tire wear. We lost over 1% on the left rear, which might not always be super important, but we're getting down almost a full percent on the right rear, which is very important, and we're still hurting the left front and right front a decent amount. So if you're in a situation where you are thinking you're gearing up for a long run, it's not worth it to swerve just for that first bit of grip in the beginning of the run and give up all this tire wear here. But if you're coming to a qualifying lap, if you're coming to a green white checker, I think this is the definitive way to heat your tires. Now the other methods have their own purposes too. So dragging brake. Dragging brake is very good at heating up the front tires especially. So if you're at a track where you need grip on corner entry and getting the car to bite, you might just want to consider dragging brake. Whereas if you want the rears to bite, this might not be for you because it did not actually heat the rears that much. But the tire wear is actually pretty darn good on this too, except for the left front, which was relatively not that good, but it's still 99.68%, so I can't be too mad at it. So I would say in general, if you're looking for a tire heating method where you're not heating up or wearing your tires too much, I think the dragging the brake method might be the best for heating up the front tires. If you want to heat up the rear tires, it looks like the way to go is stabbing the brakes, because once again, we have pretty decent tire wear stats. We're not taking too much life out of the tires, but we are heating up the rears a decent amount compared to the others. Now, putting together the swerve and brake, I thought was going to be the definitive way, but it turned out that it just wasn't that good. It didn't raise the left front tire temperature as much as I would have wanted to, and everything else was just kind of average. Especially the rears. The rears didn't heat up nearly as much as just pure swerving, and I think that's because dragging the brake keeps the motion from being really back and forth, sawing the wheel almost out of control. Like I said, if you want numbers like this on the swerve method, you got to commit to it. And I know that's not what you guys want to hear because you guys are afraid of people just being all over the place on pace laps, but hey, I'm not there to fix those problems. I'm here for science. I think what we did here was a pretty good science method. Obviously, I could have put more effort into it, but this is kind of more for entertainment than anything. I think that this data is still pretty good at showing what the strengths of tire heating is on certain scenarios, and then what the weaknesses are on the same ones. But at the same time, in terms of pure qualifying time, I really wasn't able to gain a ton of time in most situations with any of these methods. I think it's more for stability over pure time or a little bit of consistency. So what myths would you like to see tested in iRacing? Leave a comment down below. And if you left a comment on the last video and I didn't put in this video, remind me again because I got a bit of a goldfish brain. But other than that, thank you all for watching. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you all on the track.